Thank you. Good evening. This is Chair Hemalata Dandekar, and I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Deputy City Clerk Kevin Christian, will you please call roll?
Commissioner Hopkins has alerted us that he will not be here tonight. Commissioner Khan?
Here.
Commissioner Quincy?
Here.
Commissioner Shoresman?
I think she's having problems.
Oh, here. Do you hear
Awesome.
me?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Wolken?
Here.
Vice Chair Jorgensen?
Here.
Chair Dandekar?
Here. Thank you. Let the record reflect that commissioners are present through teleconferencing. I'd like to remind my fellow commissioners and staff to help us reduce background noise by muting your phone or microphones unless you're speaking. May we have the pledge of allegiance to the flag? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
To the republic
and
Stands.
for which it
one
stands,
nation under God,
one nation,
Under God.
God,
visible,
indivisible,
with liberty
with
and
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda are the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting of January 27th, 2021. If anyone has comments on the minutes before us, please unmute your microphone and identify yourself. I see no hands, no requests for changes.
Commissioner Dandekar, this is Deputy Clerk Christian. Commissioner Shoresman communicated with me in advance and commented that the action taken on item 3 says that by consensus, the Planning Commission continued review of the item to a date uncertain, and what it needs to say instead is that it was continued to a date uncertain, the applicant.
Good point. So
thank you, Commissioner Shoresman.
Thank you. So that would be an amendment to the minutes. Is the commission comfortable with that? I see I see acquiescence to that. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
This is Commissioner Shoresman. I'll go ahead and move to approve the minutes with that amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner Shoresman. A second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Jorgensen seconds. Will the Deputy City Clerk please call the roll of the motion?
Commissioner Khan?
Yes.
Commissioner Quincy?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolken?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Shoresman?
Yes.
Chair Dandekar?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. At this time, we'll hear any public comments for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the commission is necessary, may be scheduled for a future meeting. As you can see on the screen, participants of the webinar may submit a question containing their name and the item number they wish to speak to. Once the public comments for that item is opened, your microphone will be unmuted and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
Sure. One moment while I check to see if there was any emails that may have come in. There's nobody in the audience currently with their hand up and no questions in the box.
Thank you.
Yep, we have none.
Thank you very much. This is a public hearing. Any court challenges to the actions taken on public hearing items on this agenda may be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Consultants and project presentations are limited to 6 minutes. The second public item on our agenda is a public hearing item to review a project located at 862 Era Vista. I'd like to ask the planning commissioners if you have had any ex parte disclosures of contact with anyone who has provided information to the planning commissioners not on the record, so that that information may be used as part of their decision-making process. Have there been any ex parte communications? Seeing none, I'd like to ask, let the record show there are none. Would Associate Planner Kyle Bell please present the report?
There we go. Can everybody see the presentation okay? Hello, my name is Kyle Bell. I am the Associate Planner with the City of San Luis Obispo's Planning Department. Tonight we will be reviewing the 2-story office development. Oh, Donna, sorry, did you want to jump in?
Oh, sorry, Kyle. Your presentation's not up. I think it was your presentation notes.
Oh, well, then that's not right.
It was up initially.
But Morro Shores looks, Morro Bay Shores.
There we
looks
go. Is that working okay?
Now it is.
You're all good, Kyle. Thanks.
You guys didn't want to see my notes? All right, so where I left off, tonight we were discussing a 2-story office development. The project includes a minor use permit for consideration of office uses within the business park zone. Tonight's recommendation is to approve the project for consistency with the airport area specific plan and adopt the mitigated negative declaration based off the findings and subject to the conditions that are outlined in the draft resolutions. The project site is located along Era Vista Place in close proximity to Broad Street. As stated, the project site is located in the business park zone within the airport area specific plan. The existing site is vacant and undisturbed with a small drainage channel that traverses the project site along the southwestern boundary of the project site. The project site is bordered by a near identical development to the east and adjacent to the recently annexed Vieira Lane properties to the north. Era Vista Place provides direct access to the county airport facilities to the southwest. On November 4th, the project was reviewed by the ARC, which found it consistent with the airport area specific plan design guidelines, as well as the community design guidelines, and provided a recommendation to Planning Commission for final action. The neighboring project that is nearly identical to the one proposed was unanimously approved by the ARC on May 6 in 2013 and completed construction on December 2017. As outlined in the staff report, the project consists of a new 2-story office development. The project also includes a minor use permit to allow a medical office use as well as a office business and services uses within the business park zone and within the airport area specific plan. The project proposes to realign a portion of the drainage channel that traverses the project site around the developed area along the southwestern boundary of the project site, as shown on the screen. The new realignment within the project site is proposed to be enhanced as a mitigation area. An initial study has been provided by staff to evaluate the potential environmental impacts, and a mitigated negative declaration is recommended for adoption. The project provides 2 direct points of access from Aero Vista Place and provides a parking areas above and beyond the parking maximums that are established as part of the airport area specific plan to accommodate the medical office uses and satisfy the required findings for medical office uses in the business park zone. The project plans didn't include any renderings of the project because the design is nearly identical to the existing building to the east, which provides sufficient articulation and with materials and colors that are consistent with the design guidelines and compatible with the existing neighborhood. As mentioned, an initial study has been prepared to evaluate the potential environmental impacts and which identified the following areas which have potential impacts unless mitigated. The mitigation measures have been identified to reduce these potential impacts to less than significant. And that actually concludes the staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Planning Commission members, I can now call on you individually, or would you like to raise your hands if you have questions of staff? Why don't I call on you? Commissioner Khan, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Commissioner Quincy?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Shorsman?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
No questions.
I seem to have missed Commissioner Wilkin. Did you have questions?
I do have a question, but I think it's more appropriate to ask the applicant, so I'll wait until the applicant's presentation.
Thank you. May we have the applicant presentation then at this point?
The applicant for this project is Matt Quaglino, and Kevin, if you could access his microphone to let him jump in, that'd be great. Matt, if you're speaking, you're still muted. You might be self-muted, or if you're having trouble, you can use the chat to reach out to myself or Kevin Christensen, and we can assist you if necessary.
Okay, how's that? Now we're unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate your time tonight. This project's been kind of a challenge. We've been working on it for quite a while, but I think we've left no stone unturned when it comes to any environmental or other issues that relate to it. This project is adjacent to one that we finished a couple of years ago, which is right next door, and we're trying to create somewhat of a bit of a campus there. The building next door is about half medical and half professional office, and I would assume this will be about the same. I think Kyle pretty much laid out what the project is about. I know that Shauna is on board for any questions from an environmental point of view, and also we have Brooke Langle is also on for environmental questions, and Rob Miller from Wallace is available for any questions for civil, and the architect as well. Other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do have one comment I want to make, and that is a condition in the resolution that's number 27, where the utility department is asking for us to install 190 feet of 8-inch water main. And I'm not completely on board with that because I don't know, and I haven't been provided with where the city has the authority to require that we put that pipeline in. Basically, it's an orphan piece of pipe mid-block that's not going to serve much purpose at this point. I understand what they're trying to accomplish with the recycled water main, but I'm not so sure that the city has the authority to require us to put in 190 feet of pipe out in Aero Vista. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that somebody might have.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Khan.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Quaglino, on that pipe, is that pipe in the existing paved street? So you'd have to saw cut the street, put in the pipe, and then repave it, or would it be behind the sidewalk?
No, in the street. It's an 8-inch main. It's a big pipe.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Wilkin, you had questions.
Yeah, thank you. Question for Mr. Quaglino. One of the guidelines in the airport area specific plan, and I think it's referred to in the consistency matrix that's part of the plan set, is to provide for connections to adjacent properties. And since this is supposed to be providing a this project's supposed to be providing a campus effect with the project next door, I was looking for a pedestrian connection at least to the Murphy Bank building next door, but I didn't see it. So is there one planned? And if so, where would that go? And or maybe you can tell us more about the pedestrian connection.
Okay, well, thank you. And to be honest with you, it's been so long since I've seen this because I've been working for so long. I know that we discussed that at ARC, and I'm fairly sure that we had a response to that. And I'm looking right now at these plans to see. If I'm not mistaken, I believe we had that discussion and we talked about the access just being down the sidewalk because everything was where it was. I mean, we could add another walkway, but it would require losing parking to do it and people having to walk through a parking lot. Maybe Andres from Pulse would remember that discussion that we had, but I honestly don't have an answer for you on that.
Okay, well, maybe that's something the Planning Commission can discuss during our deliberations.
Okay.
That's the only question I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Shorsman.
Yeah, I just have one question. I discussed this with Kyle earlier today, but I think actually the applicant's probably a better person to ask. What are your intentions? I know you have a building that's pretty similar to this neighboring, as you mentioned, and you have a trip reduction program for that building. What are your intentions for the trip reduction program for this building? Would it be similar, and could you maybe elaborate a little bit?
I don't believe we have a trip reduction program for the other building. We were asked to do it, but in the end, it came to light that it wasn't required. If I remember right, it's been a couple of years. The trip reduction was based on an employee count per tenant, and the building didn't meet that requirement. There is trip reduction requirements in the conditions of approval for this building. I don't know if you saw that in there. Let me see if I can find it. But there.
It references it on page 27, and I guess from my conversation with Kyle, I thought there was one on the other building as well, but on page 27 of the packet, it references the airport area specific plan, saying that employers of 25 or more staff must have a trip reduction program.
Right.
So, okay, so if you don't have one for the other building, what's your plan for this one?
Follow the conditions of approval. Also on page 18, there are conditions of approval for trip reduction. If you look on page 18, it's a little bit more elaborate than what's on 27. But there are certain requirements we have to meet with the trip reductions. It's in there. I'm not sure what else we would do besides what has been conditioned on the project.
That's my only question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
We can come back to this afterwards, Commissioner Shorsman, if you need time to look at those pages. Were there
Thanks. Yeah, look.
Were there other questions? Commissioner Jorgensen, Commissioner Quincy?
No.
Commissioner Quincy?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. In that case, seeing no hands, thank you very much, Mr. Quiglano. Are there, Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
We have no public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, the floor is open for deliberations, and perhaps we could start with Commissioner Wilkins' question about connectivity between these two project areas. Commissioner Wilkins, would you like to elaborate what your thoughts?
Sure. So in keeping with the airport area specific plan guideline for connections between adjacent projects, I would like to suggest that we provide for a pedestrian connection in an appropriate location to the project next door. So if that would be the Murphy Bank building, so that people, for example, who are parked at the rear of this building and they want to visit the building, the offices next door, medical offices or other offices, don't have to walk all the way to the street and then back to that building, adjacent building. I did see there was a walkway on the adjacent property that goes up to the property line of this property. I don't know where that comes out on this property, but my suggestion would be to provide for a walkway. If we lose one parking space, I don't think that's a major deal. This project is providing in excess of the required parking anyway, and it looks like there should be a logical place to provide a connection. So I would suggest that as a condition, and that the location and design be to the satisfaction of the community development director. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself with a condition. Anyway, that's my suggestion on that issue. I did have another question for staff, but if you would, if maybe we should just go ahead and discuss this first, if the commission wants to.
I would certainly support the concept. I love the fact when parcels are connectivity by vehicles and pedestrians, because once these are developed, the public and the people who use these buildings, they don't know the history of it. They just want to get to their use and provide for what they need, and why have them come out and walk out to the street or drive out to the street and drive back. So I would totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I'd be in favor of something like that too. I think this whole area in general that around the airport is not very walkable or bikeable. And so anything that we can do to provide connectivity between the buildings other than sidewalks will just make it more pleasant, I think, for users.
I agree too. Good point, Mike.
Okay, if I may ask, oh, I'm sorry, Nick.
No, I was just going to say, as do I. So, and I think that brings the project a little bit more in compliance with those the findings we need to make, anyways.
I concur too. So I think it's unanimous.
I did have a question for staff, if I may. It has to do with the applicant's request to not install the 150 foot of a utility pipeline. I was wondering if staff had a response to that, because I don't really have enough information to make a decision on that specific request right now.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Wilkin. We did have an opportunity to talk to utilities about this concern, and really it's looking at what's currently conditioned is to install the recycled water line along the property frontage in the street, which is a typical requirement, to install improvements along property frontage. What's been suggested is shifting that line so that instead of it being located in the middle of Aero Vista at the property frontage, to shift it closer to Broad Street. To enable that connection to Broad Street. So something to, our utilities department seemed, open to that. So what might be an appropriate course of action is to add some language to that condition to the satisfaction of the utilities director. And then that would enable staff and the applicant to work on those improvement plans at the building permit stage.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on that. Mr. Quaglino seemed to say that there was no legal requirement to install that, have him install that pipe. Is that true? Or is it just you're kind of asking and hoping he will, or there's an ordinance or something that says each, developer that develops in this area will put pipe in along their frontage?
Sure, I can check and see if there's that a specific ordinance that specifically states that. But with every development project, our various departments request improvements that have a direct nexus to that project in order to provide the infrastructure to serve that project. And Community Development Director Cadron, I see you pop on as well to add to this.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that there is a specific resolution of the City Council that was adopted to say that that private development, when new buildings are constructed, that they will install the required recycled water infrastructure. So recycled water is a little bit different than the city's water system or wastewater collection system in that we don't have like an impact fee program where you pay a fee in lieu of installing the improvement that's required, and then the city then takes those fees and appropriates them adequately to develop the system. In this case, what we have are individual developments that are responsible for putting the infrastructure in on their frontage. And then when there are gaps in the system, the city will come in and connect that up to make the recycled water available. And so we don't have a fee program in place, which would have been an alternative. And so as a result, these improvements are required. And it's been pretty successful so far in terms of our ability to extend recycled water down into this area. And the solution that Shauna mentioned in terms of shifting it closer to Broad Street would just mean that this property would have access to recycled water sooner, but the requirement applies.
Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
Good night.
Yes, Commissioner Shorsman.
Yeah, I had a couple things I wanted to bring up with my fellow commissioners. Neither of them are major, and neither of them will probably be a surprise, and are kind of along the lines of what Commissioner Wilkin was proposing with the pedestrian access. I'm not sure where the best place would be to do this. Perhaps in the resolution on page 21 under item 7, where it talks about bike racks. But there is both short and long-term bike parking in this building plan. There's exterior racks, and then there's a small interior room that's more meant for long-term parking. And for the exterior parking, I would like to propose that we revise the condition, maybe revise that item number 7 condition to specify the peak style racks for the exterior bike parking. And for the interior room, I'd like us to specify, I'd like to consider specifying that they not all be wall racks. On the picture, it depicts hanging racks for 6 or 8 bikes. And that is probably not very useful for a cargo bike or a large bike or an e-bike because they're so much heavier. So I would propose that maybe some of the racks in the interior room be floor style racks that could accommodate a larger, heavier bike. So that's one thing that I would love to hear others' opinions on. And then the other thing, again, sort of related to that, my questions about the trip reduction program. It looks like that trip reduction program is required for employers of 25 or more staff in this building. And I think that smaller employers would benefit as well, even those maybe of 20 or 15 employees. And so I wondered if my fellow commissioners would be amicable to lowering the number of employees that a trip reduction program would be required for.
So we have two questions before us from Commissioner Shorsman.
This is Commissioner Wilkin. I just have a question for staff about Commissioner Shorsman's last suggestion about the trip reduction. Where does the 25, the number of 25 employees come from? Is that from the airport area specific plan, EIR, or some other document?
It actually comes directly out of the airport area specific plan for development. So actually, I could pull up the policy number if you give me a quick moment, and I can go directly to it. You could circle back to me in a second if you like.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. While he's pulling that up, just one thing to note, the mitigation measure that requires the transportation demand management plan applies regardless of number of people. That mitigation measure, in addition to, both mitigation measures came out of the vehicle miles traveled study that was completed by our transportation department. So there is no threshold. It's required, right off the bat. So just wanted to note that.
So what does that mean in terms of the minimum number of employees? Do you mean that that 25 number is irrelevant and it has to be provided for all employees that work in the building, or what does that mean?
I know that I think Kyle can speak to the specific plan consistency, but just that mitigation measure, we would require that plan to be submitted, prior to issuance of building permits and, and verified prior to occupancy. In addition, there's a monitoring plan. So there'll be some reporting follow-up with that so that we can verify that those measures are being implemented.
Yes, sorry, I was reading, but I did hear that my name mentioned. Was there something specifically you wanted me to address? I'm sorry, I might have missed something.
We were just there was just a question about the specific plan statement that is kind of separate from the mitigation measure required for the vehicle miles traveled analysis.
Oh yes, so yeah, we do have a separate vehicles miles traveled requirement and report that was provided with the initial study, but I think I am in the wrong document because I believe the requirement for the 25 persons actually does come out of the airport area specific plan EIR. So I might have to jump into another document to verify that 25 persons, but I do not see any issue with lowering that number. That would still comply with the airport area specific plan's intent. So. And generally speaking, we do require the trip reduction plan to be provided with the building permit. So to look at the entire building, since specific tenants are not provided at this time, or until specific plans are identified, then we'd be able to then require it. But it's likely that this case would have more than 25 employees for these intended uses, considering these. Hopefully that helps, and I'm going to open up the EIR for the airport area specific plan and see if I can pull that number for verification real quick.
I guess my point in suggesting this is that if there are quite a few small employers in the building and maybe one big employer, then it seems less effective to have only the larger employers that have 25 employees be incentivized to use alternative forms of transportation when they all work in the same building. So that was my thinking about lowering that number. If it's irrelevant, then I'm fine leaving it out if the plan's going to apply to the whole building. But if there's a chance that it might not, then I'd like it to apply to as many people as possible.
This is Commissioner Wilkin. Just a follow-up to staff. Would Commissioner Shoresman's concerns be addressed by the condition that requires a transportation demand management plan for the entire project?
Commissioner Wilkin, I would say yes, it would, especially because the measure that's identified for the airport area specific plan, it's kind of a more general measure applying to the whole specific plan area, whereas the mitigation measure TR1 was identified specifically out of a study and prepared by our transportation staff, and so it's more specific to this actual project and the trips that were modeled through the analysis. And so it would address the concern.
Does that satisfy your concerns, Commissioner Shoresman, that in fact the building as a whole will be considered in this plan?
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a non-issue if the whole building if it's applied to the whole building. So then I guess I'm left with my other proposed language changes regarding the type of bike racks available for short and long-term parking. If anybody wants to speak to those. Otherwise, I would just propose changing that condition to specify peak racks for exterior bike parking and floor level parking in the interior room for heavier cargo and e-bikes.
Planning commissioners, this is Deputy Clerk Christian. I just wanted to share that a comment had been posed that you may not have been able to see. That says interior bike racks are shown on detail 65 on sheet AC-1.1 to be peak racks.
Peak.
Kevin, what's the number again? AC-1.1. 1.1.
Also have it.
3.
Also have it here on the screen as well.
Mhm.
And where's that rack located on the site?
Did everybody follow along?
Yes.
Okay. And then also I have, since we've done a similar condition in the past, I have some language that I can put in right here to reflect the concern for peak racks, or sorry, concern for U-racks. Just go ahead and highlight this real quick. There we go. And we can also modify this condition to address the indoor storage as well. I'm going to give you a second to read that real quick, and then I'll pull it up on the screen. I think in a second I'm going to pull up the interior site plan so you can see the indoor storage real quick, so we can all follow along. So here you can see one of the interior bicycle storage locations. And so Commissioner Shoresman's suggestion would be to provide some additional details to provide for bicycles that would not be able to accommodate a wall-mounted rack. And so we can modify the condition further to address that.
Thank you for that, Kyle.
Is that something commissioners support? Commissioner Princey.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask if that Commissioner Shoresman's concerns.
Yes, if we can, I've seen that similar language that's now highlighted in red in other documents, and it works. The idea is to avoid that inverted U rack design, which is really, it's just a bad design, especially for heavy and large bikes. And it doesn't allow for very much bike storage. So I'm happy with that language, and also happy with, I trust that Kyle can create some language to accommodate the two different style of racks in the interior room.
So I was going to make a motion.
Thank you.
So I would move to approve the development and adopt the initial study mitigated negative declaration based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval, and adopt the draft resolution that allows the medical office use within the business park zone, subject to the findings and conditions of approval. And I would add to those conditions of approval Commissioner Wolkin's suggestion regarding the path of travel, and Commissioner Shoresman's suggestions with the assistance of planner Kyle Bell.
I'll second that.
Great. Thank you. So we have a motion, we have a second. Discussion, concerns.
Yes, on my second, I would like to ask the motion maker if it's okay to make a modification to the condition regarding the pedestrian connection that's up on the screen right now. I would suggest just specifying that connection be from the building and parking area of this project to 892 Arrow Vista, and that it include the appropriate pavement treatment. And the reason for that is if the pedestrian connection needs to cross a parking aisle, that it just have the pavers or whatever appropriate treatment is necessary to designate that as a pedestrian crossing. So again, for Kyle, that would be plans submitted for a building permit shall provide a pedestrian connection from the building and parking area to 892 Arrow Vista Place with appropriate pavement treatment, or something to that effect. That's how what I would suggest. And if that's okay with the motion maker, hopefully you can accept that amendment.
As the motion maker, that's amenable to me.
Great.
So we have the amended motion, we have a second. Are there any further discussions of this, or can we vote on this motion?
This is Commissioner Wilkin. I did have one question for staff. Is there any change needed to the condition regarding the utility line placement to allow the flexibility to discuss with the applicant the proposed location of the recycled water line? Or is the condition as written good to cover that?
I believe the condition is written with that the flexibility that Michael Codron had mentioned. I can pull it up on the screen so we can all see it together just for verification. There we go. So condition number 27 right here, it does identify to the satisfaction of the utilities director. And that would be for the installation of the 190 feet.
Well, the issue is sort of how it relates to Arrow Vista Place and whether it needs to be in the street or not. Could we eliminate the language? The project shall install 190 feet of 8-foot recycled water Maine to the satisfaction of the utilities director? Isn't that sort of where we were headed?
Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner Jorgensen, that seems to capture it. I do know the line needs to be within Aero Vista Place, so it does need to be in the street. It just, whether it's closer to this property or closer to Broad Street, it looks like that's already built in there for the utilities director to review the plans at building permit stage.
I see. Okay, I misunderstood. Thank you.
And if I can just comment, the reason why you wanted the street is that when somebody else on the other side of the street wants to access it to water their landscaping or whatever, then they just go into the street and they connect. If it was all the way in front of the frontage of the project in question tonight, they'd have to go all the way under the sidewalk to get to it. So it's a better spot to have it in the street. In the long term.
Mhm.
I certainly understand Mr. Quaglino's concerns. It is an expensive condition, but.
Am I able to comment further on that?
Is this Mr. Quiglana?
Yes.
Certain. I think we need to open it up for. Is it procedurally okay for Mr. Quiglana to be involved in the discussion at this point?
I could jump in. I believe I've spoken to the attorney's office once before about this. I believe if we, looks like we have the whole team on here. I believe if we open up to public comment for the applicant to speak again, then we have to open up for public comment for the public as well. But anybody on my team, feel free to jump in and correct me.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is I do recommend, since we're changing the condition of approval, that we hear from Mr. Quaglino about that.
Sorry, Michael, you think we should hear from the applicant?
Yeah, especially since we're modifying the condition of approval.
So procedurally, should we get a reading from Ms. Jorgensen?
Yeah, I would agree with Kyle and Michael that we should hear from the applicant since we are modifying the conditions of approval, but because we're inviting Mr. Quaglino back in, it would be prudent, I think, to open up public comment again and see if we have any additional public comment.
Okay, so be it. So under advisement, I would like to open up the committee meeting for public comments. So anybody wishing to make public comments, please register as per the directions given at the beginning of the meeting. Mr. Quiglano, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. So basically, back to the pipeline, and my only issue with that is, and I talked to the utilities department, and I told them, look, if I'm required to do it, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I'm the one that suggested that we move the pipe up the street to Broad, which would make more sense instead of having an orphan pipe in the middle of the block that probably never get hooked up to. But my other question to them was, does the city have the authority to force that? Now, I understand what Michael Codron explained, but the bottom line is, and I've done my research on this, and if this falls under AB 1600, then yes, the city can require that I put the pipe in. If it doesn't, for lack of a better word, I think it's a wish list. And if I'm not required to put in almost 200 feet of an 8-inch water main down a city street, I'd rather not have to do it. So the question is, does the city have the authority to condition me to put in the pipe, or is it just a request? And I know that we probably don't have that answer tonight, but perhaps something could go into the conditions of approval as long as the city has the authority to require it, and that would be fine. If they don't, of course I don't want to put it in. I don't want to spend the money. I mean, this project has become expensive enough as it is, and now we're adding a pipeline in. And by the way, I just was notified of that last Thursday.
Thank you.
I'll just say we can, staff can commit to, working with the applicant, with Mr. Quaglino, to get him a more definitive answer if he feels like the answers provided so far have not been definitive within, the 10-day appeal period of the Planning Commission's decision, just so that he is reserving his appeal rights to raise this issue with the city council and not be stuck with it. So we would endeavor to work on this immediately following the planning commission's decision. It sounds like I don't know whether any language in the condition needs to be changed further, because I think that that's pretty fundamental to the issue, is that it's legal for us to impose the requirement, but that is something that we would then work on with him over the next 10 days to resolve. And if it's not resolved to his satisfaction, then he has that appeal right.
If I could just weigh in on this for 1 second. The AB 1600 fee program is a growth mitigation fee that is established to allow developers to pay their pro rata share of impacts to public improvements. Public agencies can also require utilities be installed in the right of way in front of development projects such as water lines, sewer lines, and recycled water lines. So I haven't seen the resolution that the council passed, but I would believe that it's a legal document to require that if they have a resolution that passes it. Then what you do is you pass AB 1600 to do a mitigation fee program to fund that in a different way, but it's not really correlated to the requirement to put in the facility or not. So that's what I know, but I have not read the resolution.
Right, thank you. That's a good, sorry, go ahead, Marky.
I'll just hop in and say that, I'm just finding out about this issue tonight, but I'm with Michael and Commissioner Khan that there are AB 1600 impact fees, and there are also other conditions that the local agency can impose that, like Shauna Scott mentioned, so long as there's a nexus and rough proportionality between what is being asked of the applicant and the impact of their project. But I can work with Michael and the applicant to provide a more thorough analysis and authority for the city's position within the appeal timeline.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So Michael, does anything have to be changed in the conditions to allow this, or we're covered by the present verbiage?
I think we're covered by the present verbiage, although I don't know, Kyle, Shauna, if there were changes that you had discussed previously based on the conversation. So I just don't know where those stand.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I didn't initially realize that the condition already had to the satisfaction of the utilities director. It built into the language, and that would have been my only recommendation, to allow further discussions regarding the placement of that line. But, based on my conversations with utilities, I wouldn't recommend removing the condition completely. But as Director Condren mentioned, staff can follow up with the applicant to provide more definitive response within that 10-day appeal period for this item.
So this wording, to the satisfaction of the utilities director, should be added.
It already is in the condition up here on the screen. And so that does cover some flexibility for the applicant and the utilities department to discuss the specific location of that line within Aero Vista. I apologize for that confusion. I didn't realize that language was already in there.
Are there any other questions from commission or discussion before we go to a vote?
This is Deputy Clerk Christian. Before you go to the vote, I believe that there's more public comment, since you opened it back up to public comment, that we should take.
That is correct. Are there public comments on this item, Deputy City Clerk?
Yeah, there's Mr. Andres Ulate would like to speak. Give me one moment to unmute his mic.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to go back to the previous topic of the pathway in between the two buildings, because I was double checking. I'm with Poulton Associates Architects, by the way, and I was double checking the site plan, civil plans for the existing building, and we do have a drainage swale going right through that area between the two properties. There's going to be some elevation issues and drainage issues. Just not sure how that was going to factor into the decision here, but it's not going to be as easy as just connecting a couple of walkways there.
So the drainage is along the property line to the west?
That's correct. There's a planting area along the property line on both projects.
And what's the grade differential?
Well, the grade differential from parking lot surface to parking lot surface is less than a foot, but it dips down in a drainage swale in between the two.
Commissioner Walken, is bridging appropriate from your perspective? That you initiated this condition?
It's difficult for me to evaluate right now, but I would, in response to that comment, I would add a prefix to that condition saying, if practicable, plans submitted shall provide a pedestrian connection. That's the best I can do right now. So that would allow for it not to be installed if it's not practicable.
Commissioner
Other
Quincy,
commissioners
would
have any
that be
other
adequate?
suggestions, I'd be open to that.
I see.
I'm amenable to that. My lawyer brain is going to, well, I could see anybody finding a way to not find that practicable, but yes, I'm amenable to that.
It seems like from a planning perspective, all of us agreed this seemed to be a desirable thing to see between these two properties. So I think it.
Can I just weigh in on that? I think it's the benefit of the developer also to add transportation, both pedestrian and vehicle, to be comfortable for people to use the facilities. It makes the facility more desirable, in my opinion. That's all.
Yeah, I would also note that the condition still reads that this is to the satisfaction of the community development director. So ultimately, it's going to be up to the staff to decide whether the path is practicable and feasible or not.
So I think the community development director has heard our opinion on this, and are we comfortable just leaving it at that then? Okay, I'm seeing everybody nodding, not Commissioner Quincy, because his lawyer sensibilities are still alert. But I think this is the best we can do for now. So if there are no other items, I'd like to close the public comment. Are there any other public comments? Ms. Deputy City Clerk?
One moment. I believe that is it.
Okay, so
there was a question from Mr. Ulate that I wasn't sure if he got that last comment in.
Oh yeah, I think that's covered.
Thank you. All right, so I see no more questions. I'm going to mute the mics of the attendees.
thank you. So
And there's no comments via email. So we have no further comments.
given that, I'd like to bring the public comments to a close. And I don't want to preemptively prevent us hardening this requirement if the commission feels they see a way to do so, or if they wish to do so, about the connectivity. Staff is is this advisement good enough in terms of directions for you?
Yes, this will work fine, and I'm happy to read back the motion if the commissioner is deemed necessary.
Okay. I think then, if that's the case, we are ready to vote on this, I think. Yes. Will the Deputy City Clerk please call the roll of the motion? And staff, you have all the conditions and so on clear, right? Okay. Thank you.
This is Deputy Clerk Christian. I actually would like to call on staff to read the motion back in just for the public for clarity, as it's gone back and forth a bit. Kyle, can you do that, please?
Yes, no problem. So as I believe I have it, the motion is to find the project consistent with the general plan, airport area specific plan, and community design guidelines, and adopt the mitigated negative declaration, as well as the draft resolutions and findings and conditions, with the modifications to condition number 7 of the development review resolution, to identify with the language shown on the screen to prevent the use of URACs, as well as accommodate a variety of bicycles for long-term storage, and a new condition to address a pedestrian connectivity between this project site and the adjacent 862 Air Vista Place project site, as shown on the screen.
Thank you, Kyle. I will call the vote now. Commissioner Quincy.
Yes.
Commissioner Wolkin.
Yes.
Commissioner Khan.
Yes.
Commissioner Shorsman.
Yes.
Vice Chair Jorgensen.
Yes.
Chair Dandekar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Commissioners, we have one more item on the agenda. Do you wish to take a break, or can we keep going? It's only been an hour.
I'm fine.
Keep going? Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, the public hearing item before us is to review a project located at 1321 Garden Street. I'd like to ask each planning commissioner if you have had any ex parte communications to please disclose those. Any ex parte disclosures of contact with anyone who's provided information to the planning commissioners that is not on the record, so that information may be used as part of your decision-making process. Have there been any ex parte communications? Seeing none. Would assistant, that the record show that there are none. Would Assistant Planner Kyle Van Leeuwen please present the report?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. I will go ahead and share my screen here. Yep. Can this first slide be seen?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we are here to review an appeal of the Community Development Director's approval of a new 3-story, 5-bedroom single-family residence with an 800 square foot attached accessory dwelling unit, 2 attached garages, and a 590 square foot roof deck. The project does include a request for a reduction in setback requirements to allow an 8-foot setback at the corner of the roof deck, where 10 feet is normally the standard. Staff's upfront recommendation is to have commissioners deny the appeal and uphold the Community Development Director's design review approval of the single-family residential infill project in the office zone, subject to findings and conditions of approval. PC's review tonight is due to the appeal of the Community Development Director's decision, and the purview of the PC is to review the project in terms of consistency with general plan, zoning regulations, and applicable city standards, including the community design guidelines. The project site is the center of this block between Garden, Broad Street, Pacific, and Pismo Street. There is access to the site from Garden Street next to an adjacent project. The block does have office, multifamily, and single-family uses. Single-family uses also located directly adjacent to the west. This project is a 3-story single-family structure, about 3,700 square foot residence and an 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit. The lot has no street frontage, but is accessed by an easement from another property. There's a 590 square foot deck and a requested exception from setback standards. Staff does want to mention that this application for design review, architectural review, is a minor architectural review, and that with the design proposed by the applicant and having to do with some of its size and the fact of there is a roof deck that requires its own specific review, planning staff opted and took to take this to Architectural Review Commission to get their input on possible privacy and scale issues. The ARC did approve the project as proposed with minor modifications to be made at the time of building permit. Here is a rendering of the project seen from kind of the interior driveway. I'll just go ahead and show that this is the roof deck up here. You see it from this side over here. And as you can see, there are 2 garages, small ADU in here as well. The appellant did highlight 4 main issues. The first was the height, position, and roof deck of the structure violates setback standards and privacy and sound norms. The design of the structure does not match existing structures. The structure appears to support 3 functions, 2 separate living spaces, and that of office rental. And the appellant also says that the structure is too large to be located adjacent to single-story homes, especially a structure with a roof deck. I did want to cover the setback exception because there's kind of 2 things at play here. One is the non-discretionary setback exception for what we call decks and open patios. Essentially, patios that are not covered can, or a deck, a balcony can extend into a setback up to 4 feet or half the required setback, whichever is less. So certain areas up on the top here can take advantage of that language. One of the, go back real quick. As you can see with this graphic provided by the applicant, the setback line, which as buildings go taller, the setback increases, is represented by the shaded area. So this corner of the building is not within this normal setback standards, and part of this is actually okay to extend in most circumstances into the setback. The reason for that setback line kind of coming in as an angle is because the property line is not parallel with the side of the building, so that setback line kind of encroaches further the farther north we get with the project. That's kind of highlighted here. So everything above the yellow line has a granted exception where that can extend into normal setbacks, but the corner of the building, which is the main mass of the building, is not accepted except through the discretionary approval, which through zoning regulations says that minor exceptions can be approved. And to highlight this in a different way, this is a deck area as well. The railing, which is not shown on this picture, will extend into that setback, and that is allowed. In terms of the response for the concerns for setback, privacy, and sound, the side and rear setback exception can be granted when the exception is minor in nature and involves an insignificant portion of the solar exposure. Granted that it was just a corner of the building, staff did find that that is consistent with that language. The majority of the building mass is consistent with the setbacks. ARC, who, like I said, we did bring this in front of them, so to get their input on any privacy or massing issues, discussed privacy and noise concerns, and the ARC did recommend noise reducing materials along the roof deck. And with the director's approval after ARC, We actually took that a step further and required noise and overlook reducing materials and or a design modification to the roof deck to help address some of those concerns. In terms of the appellant's concern for incompatible design and size, the primary materials are brick veneer and smooth troweled stucco, similar to the structures to the east on Garden Street. The massing is similar to Garden Street structures, which have a 3-story vertical wall, and the historic firehouse, which has a tall 2-story vertical walls to it, 2 and 3-story vertical exterior walls with minimal articulation, similar to the south and west walls of this project. The ARC specifically discussed compatibility and size and did find the project consistent with the community design guidelines. The appeal also stated that the use of structure appears to be 3 uses. To clarify, the project includes rooms labeled as office. Those rooms can be used as by the residents as a home office, potentially even getting a home occupation approval for offices that have little to no visitation by clients. That cannot be rented out as a commercial office space, as this is not being considered from planning as a commercial structure and would not be consistent with the previous approval for the easement that attaches this to Garden Street that was meant to be an easement for a residential building. The structure also includes an accessory dwelling unit, which the applicant sees as a second unit. ADUs are considered accessory uses to single-family residences. The ADUs are required to have a separate entrance, which is the reason for the separate stairs next to the garage. And the ADU is consistent as proposed with city and state standards. So again, it is staff's recommendation to deny the appeal and uphold the Community Development Director's design review approval of the single-family residential infill project in the office zone. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Do you have questions of staff? Anybody have questions of staff? Yes, Commissioner Khan.
Yeah, Kyle, I noticed that the drainage pattern, there is a drainage inlet that goes underneath the old Firehouse 1 and goes somewhere, and this part of the site will drain into that, and then the site plan shows that their property line goes very near that. Have they worked out their site drainage, and is that all clear? It looked a little, just seemed like an odd setup there. They have a pipe that goes to it, there's an inlet, and seemed odd.
You know, I can say that the Public Works engineers did review this. There was some discussion. This is partially in a flood zone. For some flood zone things to address flood zone. I think it is also of note that the applicant also owns the property adjacent for the firehouse. So any issues about getting that pipe in the right spot would potentially not be an issue.
Is that Mr. Rasi?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other, Commissioner Schwarzman?
Yeah, there were some other issues brought up in public comment, some issues around disputes about the property line and some concerns about the impact on the existing trees surrounding the site. And I wondered if staff could address, I was curious about the drainage issues too, because those were also brought up, but could you discuss the property line issue and the damage to trees?
Sure, a couple of points there. The current applicant is the applicant of the previous project. A little bit of background, there was a structure proposed and approved for this site, and that was approved at the same time as the structures to the east, the Garden Green project, I believe it's called. And so that was all surveyed, and that was even part of a subdivision to create those airspace or common interest parcels that are to the east. So in terms of any questions about the appropriateness of the survey, that was the survey that was the same basic underlying documents that were used at the time of subdivision, which obviously were had to be done by a surveyor. So potentially we could add a condition saying that it needs to be resurveyed so it's staked very accurately. My understanding is that would be the only real concern, not that the lines are incorrectly stated on the current plan, but if they want to make sure that those are restaked, and that's something that we can require. In terms of trees, the previously approved project actually proposed to remove most of the trees. This project does propose to keep them. If there is concerns about tree protection measures, staff has formulated a new condition if Planning Commission would like to add that, requiring thorough review of tree protection measures and pruning measures to the satisfaction of the arborist.
Who owns the trees that hang into the property from Broad Street? The rear of those properties have some trees that are overhanging the property. Are those owned by the owner of this development?
I believe most of the large trees are on this project site.
Okay. Because I would think they're going to want them pruned, the top of them, because they kind of hang into where the building mass would be.
So Kyle, you have wording for this condition that for trees that you wanted to share with us?
Sure, there are some, other projects have concerns for trees. So let me see if I can. Am I sharing here? Let me get my back.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very long worded, but this is a pretty standard condition we see on projects that have trees that need to be protected. The building plan submittal shall show all existing trees, including off-site trees that could be affected by the proposed construction. Tree canopy shall be shown to scale for reference. Tree protection measures shall be implemented to the satisfaction of the city arborist for any trees that could be affected by the proposed grading and/or vertical construction. The city arborist shall review and approve the proposed tree protection measures prior to commencing with any demolition, grading, or construction, and the city arborist shall approve any safety pruning, the cutting of substantial roots, or grading within the drip line of any tree, and a city-approved arborist shall complete safety pruning. Any required trees protection measures shall be shown or noted on building plans. That's a condition that Hal has crafted in the past and might be the reason for its length.
Commissioner Schwarzman, would you wish to add that condition? We can't hear you.
Sorry, we can talk about that when we get to deliberations. I was just kind of asking the question about the safety and the security of the trees because it was brought up in public comment, so I wanted to know if that had been considered, but I appreciate that proposed language.
Did you, Commissioner Wilkin and then Jorgensen, are you finished, Commissioner Schwarzman?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Commissioner Wilkin and then Commissioner Jorgensen.
Yes, I have a few questions for staff. First of all, back to the drainage issue. Is the drainage required to be directed to the street or to a street?
I can't really speak to large specifics. I know questions about drainage come up often, and usually the response is that current drainage requirements for engineering are pretty robust, and any site with a history of drainage issues almost always gets better, and the requirements for not sending too much water onto another property and storing it, pumping it out are thorough. So again, engineering staff did look at a preliminary approach to how their drainage work and said that should work.
Okay. Reason I ask is because there was a concern raised about drainage in the public comment, and I just wanted to make sure that is going to be addressed in the review of the project. Typically, drainage has to be routed to a street unless there's some alternative provided through a private easement through another property. But anyway, hopefully that will be addressed by engineering. You mentioned about the fire station being 2 or 3 stories. To me, the fire station doesn't look nearly as high as this proposed building. Do you know what the height of the fire station is by any chance?
I do not have that information.
Okay. Just driving around the area and looking at all the buildings, to me, the fire station looked like one of the lower buildings in the block, actually. And then finally, there was testimony by in one of the public comments about the trees that we've been talking about that are located along the western property line. The comment was that those trees are deciduous. Do you know if that's the case?
I do not know very much additional information about trees, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Couple of questions. Let me segue with the trees. Well, the big trees that are there, certainly from my site visit, are leafless now and certainly appear to be deciduous trees. So what's in the staff report that says that the trees are going to provide privacy coverage certainly doesn't seem accurate to me, at least not year round. But the question I had, I think we ought to go back and revisit the condition about the trees. It may be better to go back to the first project approach to it. It was stated that the director added visual and noise reduction elements to the roof deck design. And I'd like to know more specifically what those were, and also whether there was any consideration of moving the roof deck protective fence back into the property a little further, so there's a little more of a setback of that fence.
Sure. I guess a little background is this project on the initial review, at least my initial review, did bring up concerns with the roof deck being in its location, that possibly a solid wall or more separation would be a good way to address that. That was not reciprocated by the applicant. And again, in those scenarios, we took it to the ARC to get them to weigh in, since there wasn't, staff didn't feel like it was a staff level decision to be able to make that call. The concern raised by the ARC was actually more about noise than it was visual impact. I think there was some discussion of keeping the railing but putting a planter on the other side of it. Once it was directed or not approved, but recommended for approval by ARC, staff did feel that if there's already going to be some sort of change for privacy, for noise, that should accommodate the potential privacy concerns as well. We have not seen a revised version, but we would expect to see something similar to, again, maybe a glass wall that's frosted on the other side of those railings, or make that a solid wall, something along those lines.
So that's not very satisfying in some way. So do you think we need to include this, write a condition that's clear that that visual and noise reducing elements need to be included? You're saying we're waiting for other plans, but that doesn't help us adjudicate the appeal.
Sure. No, that was a condition of approval for the project. What I'm saying is we had as a condition of approval to be shown when building documents are submitted. So we did not require that they show us that change before staff move forward with approval.
So they're still in the conditions here. I must have read over it. I'll look for that. Looks like it's maybe on page 155. Thank you.
Yeah, perhaps if Kyle finds them, he can point us to them so that we're comfortable with it. I had a question, Kyle. On the first floor plan, there are 3 offices indicated, right? And your explanation was that these are offices that would be used. I didn't understand your explanation about the offices.
Sure. So the applicant has labeled these rooms as offices. Offices is not a type of room that planning has a definition for or recognizes on residential plans. Those have to be counted as bedrooms. Given our rental environment here in the city, rooms labeled in offices in a lot of homes turn into bedrooms when those homes become rentals. For all intents and purposes, the applicant has expressed that they will use that in connection with their personal business, which is fine. You can use a bedroom as an office room. Again, for planning's review sake, that is considered a bedroom and is counted as such for density and parking requirements to be associated with bedrooms.
I see. So that's how the 5-bedroom count is generated.
Essentially, you have a master bedroom, another bedroom labeled as art studio, and then 3 bedrooms labeled as office.
I see.
Chair Danikar, can I make a distinction for you too? And Kyle, you can correct me if I don't have it quite right, but I just wanted to highlight for folks that as a residential building, any business that was conducted would be subject to the limitations of a home occupation permit, including that no employees of the business would be allowed to work on site. So there are regulations in place that would prevent, these rooms from being used by employees of a business that weren't residents of the property.
I see.
Yeah, and thank you, Michael. And one additional thing I would add as a checkpoint is that planning staff review business licenses as well to make sure that somebody's requesting the business license that they're requesting is consistent with uses allowed within that zone.
I see.
And just an additional follow-up regarding the previous question about the condition, that is currently identified as condition number 4, and it is indeed on page 155 of this agenda report.
So this lower floor with the 3 units that are identified as office is connected to the, is presumed to be part of a 5-story single-family home. But its connection is through a joint stairwell, right? Because the stairwell, you enter on the ground floor, and that stairwell is used by the other unit too, to go up. So you have 3 so-called bedrooms that are detached from the rest of the house through a common circulation staircase. Am I understanding that correctly?
Essentially correct. Yeah, they are connected through the stairway. The stairway is seen as the stairway of the single family residence. The ADUs can maintain a connection to the architecture or to the single family residence. They don't have to, but they can. So they've opted to have a door that connects those. But that stairway is the main stairway for the single family residence, the center set stairway.
And the ADU, so there's an exterior ADU as stair to
And
the
there's an
ADU.
additional
That's
ADU exterior entrance, right?
I see. It's a strange plan, but I see how the interpretation can be that it's a single family home. Thank you. I have no further questions. If there are no further questions, we should open this up, I think, to the public, right? To the public comments.
I think we need to hear
Do
from
we
the
need to
appellant.
go? Yeah.
Sorry.
The appellant's presentation?
Yes, we need to. So so this meeting is open. to public hearing for the public, but we will begin by giving 10 minutes to the applicant. As a reminder, the applicant's entitled up to 10 minutes of public testimony and can reserve any portion of that 10 minutes for responses. If you wish to reserve any time, could you please let the city clerk know before you begin your time, so they'll make note if you have any time remaining after your presentation. After the applicant is entitled up to 10 minutes of public testimony and may reserve any portion of that 10-minute for responses. If you wish to reserve any time, can you please let the city clerk know before you begin your time, so they can make a note if you have any time remaining after your presentation. Thank you.
This is Deputy Clerk Christian. I just need to know who is presenting so that I can unmute mics. Kyle?
It should be either it should be, I would imagine, Gary Miller, if not Catherine Miller.
Okay, one moment. All right, Mr. Miller's mic is unmuted, and I don't see a second Miller in the list.
Yeah.
And
Good evening.
Mr.
Can you hear
Miller,
me?
yes, we can. Did you have a
great.
graphic presentation, or?
I did send something to Kyle, so I wasn't planning on presenting anything, but I think I can make my points fairly clearly here. So.
Just one moment before you start then. Kyle, are you able to share your screen? Do you have this available? I'll turn the screen over to you.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, there was one or two pictures that the applicant or the appellant had sent over at some point highlighting what he saw as an inconsistency. Are those, Gary, what you would like to bring up?
Yeah, and just the photos looking into my backyard, from the fence. There's just a couple there, I think, Kyle. So.
All right, we'll switch the presentation over to Kyle in just one moment.
So, Gary, I apologize. The second email did not actually come with any pictures attached. I'm not sure if that was a.
Okay, I can just explain. No. I can just explain, Kyle. That's fine. There was just one that looked into the backyard. If you could find that one. Yeah, no need. So okay, let me start. I will reserve some time for response. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this evening. I know it's late. I could not attend the previous hearing because, so I'm Gary Miller. I'm the owner of 1372 Broad Street, which is immediately adjacent to the proposed structure. And that's the one, Kyle. And appreciate your listening to me here. I couldn't attend the last session because of COVID. I wasn't home when the card came through. So I did watch all the video recordings and appreciate your view of that. I did file an official objection to this. I think in the original review of this, it was presented that all of the homes behind were offices, and that's not the case. There are single-family residences here, and there are setbacks here. Setback exceptions here. If you look, this is the current view into my backyard from about, basically 10 feet in the air on the back of a pickup truck, looking into my backyard. The proposed building will be looking down, basically here, looking down from a height of 30 feet into my backyard with a railing, open railing, with an exception of variance. So it's very, very close. If you put yourself in my backyard, you're going to literally see a 40-foot building behind you with a nearly 600-foot deck looking right down into my backyard and the neighbor's backyard, which is a single-family residence. So our feeling is the response to our objection has been basically on technical grounds, which I understand, but from a noise and privacy and air pollution perspective, it is a significant impact for our property and the neighbors. We're not trying to stop anyone doing anything here. We understand people need to move on. What we would request is, instead of like an open railing looking directly down into our backyard and into our master bedroom, that there would be a solid wall around the deck, like there are on the developments at Marsh Street, so that that it's not such an obvious thing that people can just look straight into your master bedroom. We would request opaque windows on any of the windows that look into our backyard. Any noise generating devices such as air conditioning, heating, etc., be put on the other side of the building, so we don't have noise pollution. The grading, as we talked about, currently there is a grading issue where the property next to this one is higher than this property being proposed, and the water flows straight into our backyards and the other one. So we've seen basically the conditions, which we don't feel are clear enough in terms of, it just kind of kicks the can down the road to the next process. We would like conditions, basically saying that around the deck, which is, 30 plus feet and 8 feet from our backyard looking down, that the conditions be that be a solid wall, opaque windows, and noise generating devices move to the other side. So we're not trying to stop progress, but it is a major invasion of privacy into a single family, residence on Broad Street and the one next to it. And the other point is, we do expect the buildings to our right and the other side to actually be built out as commercial at some point. So we'll be surrounded, there'll be 2 single family residences on Broad Street surrounded by 4 buildings on 3 sides, which are 40 feet high. And basically we're asking for some understanding of that privacy invasion. The response so far has been a purely technical, meet setback rules, etc. But my question to you is, if you lived here and you had a backyard and suddenly there were buildings within 8 feet, 40 foot high with decks looking down onto your yard, would you consider that a fair, invasion of privacy? So I understand that, this probably will go ahead, but we would like some just adjustments to minimize that impact on privacy and noise and air pollution. So that's our request at this point.
Thank you. So, we are still in public comments. So let's see if there are, Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item that should be in the record?
Yes, we received a written comment prior to the beginning of the meeting that may not have made it into the record for all the public and the commissioners to see. And so on advice of the city attorney, I'm going to go ahead and read that comment into the record now. This is actually from the appellant, Mr. Miller. So in the event that these comments were not already covered in his presentation, I will read this to you now. He brought up a number of points. Number 1, our avocado tree close to our fence is a heritage tree, and if any grading, digging results in damage or the tree falls down because of this, the developer should be liable for any damages and replacement costs. A city-appointed arborist should inspect the tree before construction. 2, I am still perturbed by the fact that our houses were dismissed as offices several times in the original meeting. I know now that I am not the only neighbor objecting to the invasion of privacy, grading issues, property line questions, and negative impact to property values. 3, if the original variances were not given on the height of the existing 3+ story buildings, then this would not be allowed. Then he goes on to further say, we understand that you will probably approve the building, but request the following to mitigate light, noise, and air pollution. A solid wall around the upper deck, not railings. B, opaque windows on all windows that have a view onto our home. C, any noise generating appliance be put between the proposed building and the original units, not close to our home. D, grading be assessed and approved to not let water run into our yard, which is in a flood zone. And E, property lines properly surveyed. That's the end of that public comment, and it has been put into the record. Again, has been read into the record in case it appeared too late for the commissioners and public to see, even though the comment was submitted within our time limits. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
I see that Mr. Rossi has his hand up. I believe that he is the next presenter. Perhaps if I unmute him, he can say if this was an additional public comment. I'm not clear on this. He is the next presenter. Is that correct, Kyle?
Yeah, Mr. Rossi is the applicant and the property owner.
Okay.
And I have one or two pictures that he has provided.
So we should go on to a presentation by the applicant. Is that what is being suggested after closing public comments?
So yes, so we would hear a presentation from the applicant, and then if there are additional public comments from the general public, you would receive additional public comment.
I'll close the public comments for now and ask the applicant to make their presentation.
This is Rob Rossi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. Good evening.
Hi.
I would like to give just a brief history because I think within that history, it may address some of the issues here. We bought the fire station and the parking lot from the city 25 years ago and used it as our commercial office primarily with a small residential component where the firemen used to reside. And over the years, those uses have changed. We've changed our business and our family operations. We sold the front part of the parking lot to Mr. Brennan, who built Garden Green. At the time he proposed Garden Green, we proposed a similar looking building on this site in the same footprint as the building you're looking at tonight, the same height, 35 feet with no exceptions, and the same 3-story configuration. I might also mention that that building had the same decks at the various levels, looking over the adjacent properties, the kitchen windows, the living room windows, and all of that. So there was a precedent. That building went all the way to building permit, and we elected not to go forward and build the building that was fully approved. It did allow for the removal of the trees that are on our property. The avocado tree is not on our property. But I don't want to belabor that history, but from the standpoint of site design, the city had a survey when we bought it, and a whole new map was done and recorded by Westland Engineering on all of the parcels. So all of the parcels are documented, and all of the corners are in monument. The drainage was built by the city. That site goes way back to the turn of the century, last century, and the city built the drainage, and all of the buildings, the fire station and the new Garden Green and this building will continue to use that drainage, and none of that drainage, to the best of my knowledge, has ever gone on adjacent properties. That's why the city built it. It is a very large storm drain that runs behind the fire station, and all of these properties drain into it. At the current time, because this site remains a parking lot, and the city had some improvements back there at the time we acquired it for their fire aspects, there's pipes that still have to be put underground when the grading for this is done. But all of it will drain through those existing culverts. And on their way to the culvert, they'll go through a bioswale, which today doesn't exist. Right now, the parking lot asphalt for the existing parking lot is right up against the base of those trees that we've been discussing. That asphalt comes back to the wall of the building, so there will be a bioswale of 5 to 8 feet in width that picks up all of the drainage from these surfaces and then takes it into the same ultimate storm drain system. The trees are deciduous. Obviously, the avocado isn't. We do respect the overlook issue. And when we left the ARC meeting, we began working on a way to take the deck on the 3rd floor and set it back. And we're going to do it by a series of planters that provide some planting for both visual and sound buffering and a solid wall on the inside. We agree with Mr. Miller. The roof equipment will be on the roof and won't be down at the back property line where he is. I'm trying to think what are the other issues. Oh, I disagree with the opaque windows. I mean, we want sunshine the same as everyone else. That's the kitchen and the living room and the bedroom that face that direction. And they were all clear glass windows in the prior building that was approved for building permit. So, I mean, I don't know that we're going to use the building in any way different than anyone else, whether we're on the roof having friends over or somebody's in a backyard. It's the same kind of, domestic noise. It's not a commercial building. The offices on the ground floor are for family purposes. And basically, we don't have any kids living at home anymore. So it's for guests and for our other operations. And then we're remodeling the firehouse, which does have our home in it on the 2nd floor. And by the way, a question was asked. It's 26 feet tall at the highest points, 28 in one spot. This building's 35 feet, which is equally the city limit. I'm happy to address anything else if I've skipped over something, but again, this building is more or less the same building, different architecture of the one that was prior approved and permitted for construction with clear glass windows, and none of these issues came up at that time, but that's water over the dam. We want to be a good neighbor, and we want to do a roof deck that doesn't look down in his backyard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rasi. Are there questions to Mr. Rasi from the Planning Commission? Commissioner Shorsman.
Yeah, I just have one that maybe he can answer. I think I heard you say just now that the previous building that went all the way through the process and then you decided not to build it was the same height, same general floor plan, but there were no exceptions to the setbacks. Did I hear that correctly? And this one does have a couple of setback exceptions.
The exception, I believe, on this is only that one deck railing, which by the solution we're talking about to avoid overlook goes away. So it won't have any exceptions that I'm aware of. I don't remember if the first one did. It sits on exactly the same footprint. It was L-shaped. It had the same setback from the adjoining property line. It did, it was handled, the process, by Mr. Brin, who was doing Garden Green. So I don't know that I was that intimately involved in the process. I wasn't thrilled with the architecture, and that's why I didn't go forward and build it. But it did go all the way to the issuance of a building permit, which in theory could be reconstituted by paying a fee today. But it sat in the same envelope. It had a carport instead of a garage, and it had a 1-car garage and a 2-car carport. This has 3 garages, a 2-car and a 1-car. But we had some drawings that we submitted earlier, and we could provide those. I can't do it now, but of superimposing the 35-foot building that was approved there and this one. And there are little variances because of the architecture, but I don't think there's any height variances or density variances. And it was only that railing and that was because of the warped setback that occurs in the diagonal property line. And it was only a small part of that railing.
Okay, according to the staff report, although albeit small, there is 2 exceptions. One that's on the south side that's just looks like 3/4 of a foot. And the other one is on the west side that we're talking about that's 2 feet.
Right.
So just wanted to clarify that, but thank you for that answer. And that's all my questions.
And I might mention the one that's on the south side is against our property.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
I might just say that what we're proposing on the roof deck, the 3rd floor, is basically a 3-foot wide planter that would go back and forth at different levels. And then behind it on the deck inside side would have a full height solid railing.
So that seems to be what the applicant was asking for.
The appellant, yes.
Yes, sorry, the appellant, yes. Thank you. If there are no further questions of the applicant, are there any responses from the appellant? If Deputy City Clerk, does the appellant still have some time?
The appellant has 5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Miller, would you like to take that time?
Yeah, thank you. So, Mr. Rossi, thanks for that. I would just like to, have some kind of drawing that shows the height of that solid railing. It's just a privacy thing, I'm not trying to stop you building what you want to build. It's just that it's so high compared to the backyard that it will just, when you go, if there's no privacy when you go in the backyard, it's just going to feel like you're completely overlooked from your property. So I'm not trying to stop you, but I would appreciate some idea of how high that solid railing will be, how far back, and then I don't know whether we can visualize what the actual view down to the backyard would be. But that's my main concern, is just being overlooked at 35 feet, 8 feet from my back property. And I think you appreciate that is an overlook issue.
So the appellant is asking for information from the applicant. Can we just be on the record for that and then move on? Staff, how do we proceed?
Yes, you can always, come back to the applicant to ask them a question about the change. And also we can have Kyle pull up that current condition number 4 to see if there's any modifications your commission would like to see to that condition following public comment once we get into deliberation.
Okay. So I'm just losing track of the sequence at this point. Shauna, what's the next step? Do we ask the applicant to respond, or do we close public comments and come to deliberation?
I suggest at this point we see if there's any additional public comments, and then you can go back to the applicant and then ask them any questions you may have. And Marky, if you have anything to add, please jump in.
No, I think that's the right approach. Chair Dandekar, you can ask the applicant for additional information, but as Shauna has pointed out, let's be mindful to open public comment again, since we've received an additional presentation from the applicant, and then we can close public comment and move on to deliberations.
Okay, so I'd like to open up the public comments to see if there are any external comments that we are receiving. Deputy City Clerk, could you see if there are any public comments?
Absolutely. It's just a little bit unclear to me right now. It appears that an individual who had supplied comment in advance in writing has been coming in and out of the meeting, perhaps having some difficulty staying in the meeting. I just wanted to make sure that they were available if they wanted to make comment, and let them know, since we don't have the instructions up, that if they would like to make comment, that they can click on the raise hand icon in the attendee tab. There we go. So, and then Mr. Miller actually raised his hand again. I'm going to call on Edwina Olt as additional comment now.
Thank you.
Edwina, you're self-muted now. There should be a little, there you go, you got it. Go ahead and speak. I see that your microphone is open. We're not hearing you. Oh, okay.
Is it possible for Edwina Olt to type her comment into the chat so that we can hear the public comment? Because she's indicating an intent to speak.
Certainly, there should be an option for you to either pose you should be able to pose a question. There's a question pane. We'll give her a moment. Oh, it looks like she went offline, but there's two occurrences of her now. So I believe that she's still attempting to get in.
Kevin, this is Marky. Is there a dial-in option that she could use?
I saw her actually come in once on that. So Edwina, I see that you've come in again, and I have unmuted you. I can see, commissioners, that she's absolutely attempting to get in. There is a phone-in option, Edwina, on the first page of the agenda. Let me see if I can get that up for you. One moment.
I have it up, Kevin, if you want to switch over to me.
Okay, let me do that.
And Chair Dandekar, one of your potential options could be if the planning commissioners have any additional questions for staff or the applicant or the appellant, we could do that now and then check back in for any additional public comment, or hopefully Edwina Olds can call in and present the public comment.
Kevin, did you say that you had another request from Mr. Miller for public comments? And does he still have time for that?
Mr. Miller had put his hand back up, and yes, he has, in his 10-minute time, he has approximately 3.5 minutes left. If he would like to speak more, I will unmute his mic and he can let us know if he wants to speak more. Mr. Miller, you're...
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I really don't have anything else to say. I'd just like to know how that overlook is going to be mitigated for Mr. Rossi. And I know Edwina, she's my neighbor, right? So she had the same concerns about the trees, but I think she submitted all of that in writing to you as well. So you've all seen that, I think. So I've been texting her, giving her the dial-in number, but it doesn't look like she can get in. But so I'd really like to just make sure that, you know, it's in the conditions and Mr. Rossi is okay with doing a solid wall at a height that minimizes the overlook at this point.
Thank you. I think I will close the public comments then and bring them back to Planning Commission, and we can open them up again if we have connection with the public who are requesting to be heard. So I'd like to close it. And are there commissioner comments? Commissioner Shorsman.
Yeah, I guess this is a question for the appellant, so I don't know if this screws us up with getting back into the public comment questions or not, but it seems to me that the appellant's main issues are the overlook of the deck, and the applicant has offered to make some considerable changes to the deck to allow for more privacy and noise, and essentially take care of that 2-foot setback, but with through other means than just moving the wall. And then the appellant is also concerned about the trees, which we've talked about possibly adding a condition to have the tree issues looked into more carefully before the project goes forward. And then the third issue that I think I've heard is the request for opaque glass or some sort of treatment to the windows that face his backyard. And I think I heard the applicant say that he's not super supportive about changing that feature. But I guess I just wanted to clarify if we've covered all the appellant's issues, or if he would still like to request some sort of accommodations related to the windows. If that's still a concern to him. I think both the appellant and the applicant are being extremely neighborly to each other in this whole deliberation. And so I would just like to see, you know, all of the issues addressed if possible.
Well, I'd like to
would he be happy with what's there, or if would he still like to see that one last issue addressed?
I think I'd like to hear from the rest of the commissioners on this, because public comment is now closed. Commissioner Wilkin.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to throw a little monkey wrench in this, because I have another issue that I'm having. The issue is that I'm having difficulty finding how this project meets a couple of the policies, one in the land use element and one in the community design guidelines involving compatibility with surrounding development. One of the policies is mentioned in the staff report, and it's community design guideline 5.3 on infill development. It talks about infill development needing to be compatible in scale. And the other policy is in the land use element. It's policy 2.3.9. And it says that the city shall require new housing built within an existing neighborhood to be compatible with the character of the neighborhood. And then it further talks about the things that need to be addressed for compatibility. And one of them is scale, mass, form, and architectural style. So my issues are the scale and the mass of this building compared to the others on the block. I've carefully looked at all the other buildings that I could see on the block, and they all appear to be 1- and 2-story buildings with smaller scale buildings to the west, including the appellant's house. The only 3-story building is the one adjacent. I think that's Garden Green. It's been referred to. However, that building has substantial setbacks on 3 sides on the upper floor. So I really am having problems finding this building to be compatible in scale and mass with what's around it, even the 3-story next to it. In addition, from looking at the plans, it looks like there's a substantial mass of the building that's actually above 35 feet. I understand that's allowed through exceptions, but we've got the elevator and stair towers, and I think there's some other portions of structures that protrude above 35 feet. So you've got.
We're having difficulty. There was an individual who.
Can I go ahead, or I hear a voice in the background? I'll keep going. And it appears that there's substantial mass of the building that's above 35 feet. So so I'm not finding consistency with LUE policy 2.3.9 and community design guideline 5.3. My suggestion would be to make this more compatible with what's around, to provide some substantial step backs on the upper floor. In addition to the balcony, the deck being step backed, I think this project should have upper floor step backs, just like or similar, along the same lines as the Garden Green project. I'd also just like to read from policy or community design guideline 5.3C. And what it says is the height of infill projects should be consistent with that of surrounding residential structures, and that where greater height is desired, which is the case here, an infill structure should set back upper floors from the edge of the first story to reduce impacts on adjacent smaller homes. So I'm just talking about a 3rd floor setback, not a 2nd floor step back. I think that's what's been done on the Garden Green project, and I think that should be done on this project to be compatible with the small scale nature of the neighborhood. So sorry to throw a monkey wrench into things, but that's my suggestion on this. And I know it's not exactly what the appellant was asking for, but this is a de novo hearing, and we still have to make findings of consistency with the community design guidelines and the land use element. So that's my comment and suggestion.
Staff, did you want to have any kind of response to this, or shall I move on to Commissioner Quincy? Did you want to say something? Did I see your hand? No. Staff, do you have any reading on what Commissioner Wilkin?
Sure. One point would be that height regulations do allow for elevator towers and stair towers to extend up to 10 feet above the 35 height limit, and that is the portion of the project that is above the 35 limit. In terms of land use policy, that land use policy language is reflected, as Commissioner Wilkin has brought up, in the community design guidelines in 5.3A and 5.3C. And this was, again, brought up with the ARC. It's their purview to review projects for those consistencies. And again, they moved it along. So that's just want to make sure that that's clear. They're not saying that the Planning Commission can't reevaluate those aspects, but they were highlighted for ARC discussion at that time.
And the compatibility with neighbors, scale and mass issue that is raised on the land use side?
Yeah, again, that land use policy is reflected in the community design guidelines, which is accurately cited by Commissioner Wolkin.
Commissioners, any other? So, Commissioner Wolkin, did you then want to put conditions of change that based on that? I'm not quite sure.
If the commission wants to follow my suggestion, I think we need to take a different action. I guess I would rely on staff and council, but I think my recommendation would be to partially uphold the appeal and require that the applicant come back with a redesign to provide substantial third floor or upper floor step backs of the building. And then I guess that would be either evaluated by staff or come back to the commission. That would be my intent. I don't know if that's the correct procedure, but I would rely on staff's recommendation for how to proceed if the commission is interested in that approach.
Could I hear from other commissioners? Commissioner Quincy.
I mean, I somewhat agree with Commissioner Wolkin. If that's the route we go, then that's probably what we have to do. I guess I'm a little perplexed as to why the applicant and the appellant haven't really had an offline conversation here. It sounds like, you know, they can come to some agreement here, and we're kind of acting as mediators on issues that it sounds like they can figure out. So, you know, I think another route too would be to have the appellant withdraw the appeal and try to work this out. But those are my thoughts.
Anyone? Yes, Michael, you want to come in?
Yeah, I think probably maybe an appropriate step to take at this point would be for Commissioner Wolkin to propose a motion and see if there's a second and see if there's support and discussion around that motion. Given the proposal is somewhat different than the staff recommendation, I think it's important to see whether there's potential majority support for going in that direction.
I'll be happy to state a motion if that's okay with the chair.
Yes.
Okay, so I would move that the Planning Commission partially uphold the appeal and ask that the project be redesigned to provide substantial upper floor step backs, and then return to staff for evaluation. And I guess we can leave it up to staff whether or not it needs to come back to the commission.
Is there a second for this motion? I'm not hearing a second for this motion. Yes, Commissioner Shorsman.
I'll go ahead and second it with the comment that I appreciate what Commissioner Wolkin is saying, and when I came on the call tonight, I was sort of leaning in the direction that I think he is, in that I am not convinced that the project as is consistent with the community design guidelines for in several of the areas that he noted. I'm looking for the language here. Scale, siting, detail, and overall character is the language that's used in the staff report. Maybe scale, because there are a couple of 35-foot buildings on that block, not on the side. that we've been mostly talking about tonight, but there are a couple of buildings that are that tall. But in terms of the other areas of siting, detailing, and overall character, I'm not sure it's consistent. But I was sort of softening to the collaboration or the cooperation that seemed to be going on between the appellant and the applicant tonight, and thinking that maybe they could come to an agreement on these things. But all that said, I'll second the motion. I just wanted to explain where my thinking was.
Thank you. Commissioners, we have a motion and a second. The floor is open for discussion. Yes, Commissioner Quincy.
So I understand the points that Commissioner Wolkin and Commissioner Shoresman have made. They're well taken. I find myself deferring a little bit more to ARC. That is their purview. It is somewhat of a subjective analysis. And so I find myself deferring to them. And on the objective analysis, I think that the project pretty much meets the objective requirements. So I think I probably would be voting no on this motion.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
I would agree with Commissioner Quincy on this. There's no question, and I think this is one of the things that's concerned other commissioners, that the block is certainly very eclectic in terms of what's been built over there in a long period of time. And so it's easy to want to say, well, there ought to be a little more of this or a little less of that. But all in all, I think this is actually a good addition to the block. And even if it were a little bit taller, it's right in the middle of the block. It's not like it's going to be immensely visible, but I actually think it's nestled in there in a way. I think the architecture is interesting. I think it fits with certainly the firehouse and the townhouses next to it. It certainly is awkward. There's just no way around it when there are one-story residences to the west. But I feel like we've looked at this carefully. Our ARC has looked at this carefully, and I feel like it's a pretty good solution for a really tough building site. So I'm ready to support the original recommendation, but not this one.
Are there, Commissioner Khan, do you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Commissioner Jorgensen and Commissioner Quincy. One thing I noted today when I did a site visit was how tall that church was across the street on Garden Street. And I started looking at all the building massing, and I agree with the term eclectic. It is eclectic, and I also applaud Mr. Rasi for making some changes to his design, verbal changes. He said he'd change the railing on the top and have the planters along that side there to reduce the people peering down into Mr. Miller's backyard. So I would agree with Mr. Jorgensen and Mr. Quincy.
Thank you. I too think that this area, this block and adjacent blocks are in transition, and the design solution is unusual, but I think it's an interesting solution for an infill project. It's creating at least 2 units of housing in a downtown location, and it is bringing in a style which is not incompatible with the apartment structures which you drive by in order to get access to this residential. So I think that I don't support the motion because I believe this is an area that is moving towards greater height, more density within the guidelines of land use constraints. So I think if the concern about oversight can be worked out between the applicant and the appellant, that this would be a project that would actually add interest and surprise and would enhance the downtown development as it's evolving. And so I don't think I support sort of a redesign of the upper story particularly. Michael, were you trying to get into the conversation?
Well, so that motion won't, I don't know if you want to call the question and have a vote, but it doesn't sound like that motion will pass. And so I also just wanted to highlight that we're sort of past the point of, really having an agreement between the appellant and the applicant that we can sort of act on in the moment. And so what I would encourage would be, another motion then to deny the appeal and approve the project, and the Planning Commission can add any conditions, to that action that they think would help the applicant and appellant essentially arrive at, those changes that will be acceptable to the appellant, which the appellant's appeal rights don't expire with this approval. They have the ability to appeal this decision to the city council, I believe. So with that being the circumstance, I think that there is an interest in the applicant, even if the Planning Commission denies the appeal and upholds the approval, the applicant still has an interest in talking to the neighbor and explaining what changes they intend to make to avoid a subsequent appeal.
I think, do we need to vote on this motion since it's on the floor and there's a second?
Yes.
I think so. So can we vote on the motion? And then we could think about what next. Deputy City Clerk, could you have a roll call on the motion?
Sure. What we have in front of us right now is a motion by Commissioner Wilkin, seconded by Commissioner Shoresman, to partially uphold the appeal and ask that the project be redesigned to provide upper floor step backs and return to staff for consideration to be heard again. Commissioner Wilkin.
Yes.
Commissioner Shoresman.
Sorry, I was not muted. I was muted. Yes.
Commissioner Khan.
No.
Commissioner Quincy.
No.
Vice Chair Jorgensen. Vice Chair Jorgensen.
So sorry, no.
Chair Dandekar.
No.
I'm going to take a shot at another motion, if that's all right, Chairwoman.
The motion fails. The floor is open for other motions.
So I will make the motion to adopt draft resolution attachment 1 denying the appeal and uphold the community development director's design review approval of this single family residential infill project, with the added condition that the third floor or the roof deck be designed with planters on the westerly side that faces Broad Street to push the people enjoying the deck back so that they don't look down upon the appellant's backyard.
I'll second that.
Didn't we hear from Mr. Rossi that he's actually putting a translucent barrier there? Isn't that what we heard?
I didn't quite follow it.
Yes, Commissioner Quincy.
Yes, I think he said that there was going to be that he was going to build a wall.
Right.
So the railing would be solid?
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Okay.
So my discussion to the commission would be, I support the motion, but perhaps we could just beef up the condition a little more to incorporate the wall.
Yeah, so I will amend my motion to say that the roof deck will have a solid wall instead of a railing. And also the planter to reduce the ability of people enjoying the roof deck to peer down into the adjoining properties on Broad Street.
The second agrees.
And the second agrees. Yes, Commissioner Quincy.
And sorry to micromanage a little bit more, but should we set a height on the wall?
Well, from what I understood in the testimony, the wall would have been the height of a standard railing of a deck, not a 6 or 8 foot wall.
Gotcha. Okay. I just want to make sure that it's tall enough to accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Yeah.
Commissioner Shorsman.
Could we also add a condition to the motion regarding examination of the trees?
Yes.
I think that Kyle was putting together some language for us, maybe for a possible condition.
I think it'd probably be the same verbiage that we used on the last item. Oh, wait, no, that was this item, wasn't it? Kyle put together. Yeah, I will add the recommended tree protection condition to my motion.
The second accept that?
Yes.
Commissioner Quincy, you had a comment on that, did you? No.
No.
Are there any comments or any discussion?
This Kyle, sorry to jump in. I drafted a little bit of modification to the condition 4 that I just want to see if that wording is satisfactory for you.
Thank you. Please let us take a look.
So consistent with ARC's motion, plans submitted for a buildings permit shall incorporate noise and overlook reducing modifications to the roof deck walls and eliminate open railing facing Broad Street along the roof deck to the satisfaction of the community development director.
I believe that Mr. Rasi talked also about planters along that side, did he not?
At that point, it would be up to his option to do so.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Oh, could we add in there the purpose? I guess overlook reducing modifications for the roof deck to eliminate the open railing facing Broad Street. Okay, yeah, that's fine. The motion maker accepts that modified condition 4.
The second?
The second. Mm-hmm.
The second accepts it, right?
Yes.
Discussion.
Does the eliminating the railing, does that necessarily mean then there's going to be a wall, or should we specifically say that?
Kyle, can we see that again, please? Yeah, so it would say modification of the roof deck walls and yeah, so that, I guess, Kyle, I don't want to wordsmith it, but say in there that the railing will be solid on the west side of the roof deck facing Broad Street.
Maybe to eliminate open railings and replace with a solid wall facing Broad Street.
Yes, that would be fine.
My understanding was Mr. Rossi was suggesting using planters.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what.
So if the planters are much more sound reducing and they're deeper than just wall. And I think, we might be micromanaging a design solution here. rather than sort of setting up a framework in which the two parties can find a design solution that works for them. That's my concern. Commissioner Wilkin.
Yes, I might suggest that maybe we just have language or additional language that says that there shall be the deck or the usable area of the deck shall be set back from the edge of the building. And I think that's what Mr. Rasi was suggesting. That could be done with a planter or through some other means, and so we could leave it open. But I think the idea was to get people using the deck back from the edge of the building, in addition to having the solid barrier. So maybe if we just stated that, it could be up to the applicant and the appellant maybe to figure out something, agree on some design solution for that.
What I want to be careful of is that the appellant doesn't have control over the approval of the project. I mean, not that I don't respect Mr. Miller, but I don't want there to set up an adversarial relationship that they can't agree, and then they have to bring it back to us again.
Yeah,
So I would say, go ahead.
I'm just suggesting that we, in addition to the language on the screen, add a provision that the usable area of the deck be set back from the edge of the building by some amount.
So modification of the roof deck by setting.
But a planter is usable area. A planter is used.
Yeah.
I don't think the wording.
Plans shall be modified. I'm reading now what he's writing. Plans shall show a modification or reduction in the usable area along the western edge of the building by 3 feet. So he's holding people back 3 feet from the westerly edge of the building.
You know, this wordings make sense to me. I'm sorry. It's sort of saying, not sort of, it is saying incorporate noise and overlook reducing modifications. Design modifications is what's being called on to the roof deck walls and eliminate open railing facing Broad Street. I think between the two, we're saying that they should do a design, a modification that reduces overlook and not to have open railings. I think that's probably sufficient to have the applicant work out a solution that would be satisfactory. It's reducing overlook, which is what the appellant seeks to reduce, to have reduced or eliminated.
Right.
The open railing is a specific thing because the current design has open railings, so we say no. I think this works for me.
I would agree, and I trust our staff to understand the discussion tonight and to, incorporate this into the design.
Yeah, I agree.
So if this wording is satisfactory, and then there's the condition on the trees. So yeah, with these two conditions, are we ready to vote on this? Deputy City Clerk, are we required to allow the applicant and the appellant to use time to use up that any time they might have?
You haven't opened it back up.
Mayor Dendekar, you are not required to, but if you wanted to reopen public comment to ask questions of the appellant or applicant, this could also be an additional opportunity just to check if the person who was trying to provide public comment earlier is able to provide that comment for the record.
I think that's a good idea. So I would like to open up the public comment so it is free. It is open for the applicant and the appellant and other members of the public?
Mr. Rossi has requested to
Thank
speak.
you. Mr. Rossi.
You're self-muted right now. He raised, there we go.
Is that open now? Sorry.
Yes, you got it.
Thank you. Thank you. Just trying to summarize, we agree with the solid railing. We agree with setting the railing into the roof, or into the deck further to shrink the deck, but also set it back so no one can get to the edge of the building. And then we do want to install planters with a variety of plantings along that side. And I think that covers the issues that you've been talking about, and we appreciate the compromise.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. Do we have any other comments?
Mr. Miller would like to speak again.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller,
so thank you, Mr. Rossi, for that. I just would like it that, the wall is high enough and back enough that people can't just look into my master bedroom. So I don't know how we do that. I take it on good faith that you're going to do that. I'm not trying to stop you building the building. I just don't want people, I don't want, when I'm in the master bedroom, to look up and see that somebody could look over into the master bedroom. That's really the main thing I'm looking for. So if you can comply with that and we document that here, that's fine by me.
I don't see further public comment requested. Well, Mr. Rossi is asking again, but I don't know that that's up to you to go back and forth. I wanted to comment on the earlier public comment request by Edwina Olt. We were not able to open up any communication with her. I did send her a chat to see if that function would work. I didn't get a reply back on that. I just did. It says I cannot get into this meeting. I have so since she may be able to hear this right now, I have sent you an email, and I had opened that up as an opportunity. If you would like to write your further comment, I can read that into the record as our other option. But I was able to just read your chat, so you could write it into that as well as an option.
So I think Mr. Rossi had some time left on his 10 minutes, correct, Kevin?
Yes, he did. He had approximately 4 minutes left on his.
So if he wishes to be recognized, I'm happy to have him be recognized.
Am I in?
You are in.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're going to work real hard to make that not have an overlook situation. We appreciate it. I do want to mention, and I want to make sure that there's an understanding. The windows actually on that side of the building are identical to the one that was in the building that was approved before. And they are set. One's the kitchen window, one's a living room window that has a deck. I think the deck square footages have been combined because there's a lower deck and an upper deck. The upper deck is not that large, but still, I think we understand the issue, and we will work hard to give this visual separation so anyone on that roof deck isn't looking into a bedroom or the backyard.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. I think, Kevin, you haven't had an email or anything, right? So I don't think we can just continue to wait for public comment. And I would like, if you are not, you haven't heard anything at this point, I'd like to close public comment.
Chair Dandekar, this is Deputy Clerk Christian. Edwina Olt was able to respond to the chat, and her further comment was that I still have concerns on the windows on the lower stories that will shine into my house. I do not feel that those have been addressed. And that's the end of her comment via chat.
Thank you. I'm going to close public comment now and bring it back to commission. I have a question of staff. There are no setback requirements that are being, all the setback requirements are being adhered to, are they not? On that side?
Except for the corner of the building, the rest of the structure is consistent with setbacks.
So isn't my understanding that a person who builds on their property conforming to the setback requirements is allowed the apertures they need for light and air and so on in the property?
I think it's accurate to say that the setbacks and the way they increase as you go up are designed to aid in not creating spaces that impose either visual or remove somebody's solar exposure. Not to say that that's always 100% true. That's definitely one of the points of those additional setbacks.
Thank you. So commissioners, we have a motion with two conditions. We've opened up for public comment, received comment from the applicant and the appellant and another neighbor. I think if you have any further discussion items, please raise your hands. Otherwise, I think we're ready to move on a vote on this. Yes, Commissioner Wilkin.
I'd just like to say that I support the two conditions regarding trees and the balcony. However, I don't support the project for the reasons I stated earlier, and so I'll be voting no for that reason.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Shorsman.
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to say that it doesn't sound like there's a way that we can appease the appellant and the public, a member of the public that spoke regarding the windows, because they're just allowed. But I would encourage the appellant and the applicant to maybe, discuss about this a little further and see if they can come to some agreement about that issue. Otherwise, I support the two conditions and we'll vote in favor of.
I see no other hands raised for comments, so I think we're ready to vote on this motion with the two conditions. Deputy City Clerk, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Khan.
Yes.
Vice Chair Jorgensen.
Yes.
Commissioner Quincy.
Yes.
Commissioner Shorsman.
Yes.
Commissioner Wilkin.
No.
Chair Dandekar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
The motion passes, so thank you. Comments and discussion, can we have so I think that completes the items on our agenda, except for staff updates and agenda forecast.
Yes, thank you, Chair Dandekar. For your next Planning Commission meeting, which will be on February 24th, there are 3 items on the agenda. One of those items is a 2-story mixed-use development located at 3806 Ranch House Road. That's within the Orchid Area Specific Plan. The project includes 9 residential dwelling units that will be affordable units, helping to meet the affordable housing requirement for the Rigetti Ranch, Jones Ranch, Immel Ranch, and Pratt properties within the Orchid Area Specific Plan. The project also includes 10,400 square feet of commercial space located in 4 separate buildings. The other item will be a use permit for a sorority located within a residential zone at 1320 28 Foothill. And the third item on that agenda will be an interesting one. It's an EIR scoping meeting for the LOSAN project. LOSAN stands for Los Angeles, San Diego, San Luis Obispo Rail Corridor Authority. This project, the city is not the jurisdiction issuing any kind of approvals for this project, but we are hosting that scoping meeting for the rail authority to enable the public to be able to provide comments to the authority, and also for your commission to hear those public comments. The project site is about 8.3 acres located south of the existing Amtrak station. It's between the Union Pacific main tracks and the existing commercial and residential development to the west, with the southern extent of the project terminating west of McMillan Avenue. So this is just right along the railroad tracks there. The project includes the construction of a new rail yard, storage and servicing tracks, operations and maintenance buildings, landscape improvements, and pedestrian improvements. So you'll have a good agenda for the 24th, and that concludes staff updates.
Thank you very much, Shana. So I think we are ready to adjourn this meeting. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, February 24th at 6 p.m. via teleconference. Thank you very much for your work today. Appreciate it. See you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Aye.